And should be some exciting things happening. I am Lucia Longhurst, the town clerk, and to my left is Town Council Attorney Lauren Goldberg, who, if you don't mind, I did put her at the end of the agenda, but she's willing to step in before that, if it's okay by you. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. If we can, this purpose of this meeting, it's the initial meeting for the Charter Commission for purposes of organizing. And if we can pledge allegiance to the flag now, and then we'll get started.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to take a roll call. Janie Goodwin. David Heaney.
Here.
Denise Luciano.
Here.
Sandra Olahead.
Here.
Laura Elsie Parker.
Here.
Kevin Schleicher Jr.
Here.
Keith Silver.
Here.
Kerry Snyder.
Here.
David Wren.
Here.
Just to give you, before we start to nominate, just to give you just a little update of the responsibilities. Lauren will really get into them after. The chair's responsibility is setting the agenda and summarizing the meetings in compliance with the open meeting law. The vice chair has the same responsibility if the chair is not available. The clerk, whoever is the clerk, they're responsible for all minutes and agenda. Agenda is making sure the agendas are posted 48 hours in advance. Holidays and weekends do not count as part of the 48 hours. Minutes are to be approved within 30 days from the date of the meeting, whichever is later, unless the public body can show good cause for further delay. Okay? We can now start by electing a chair. Is there a motion for a chair?
I nominate Laura.
I'm sorry?
I nominate Laura.
Okay.
I'll second.
Is a second?
And ask if there's any other nominations.
Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Kevin.
Okay. All right. and then-
I second that.
You
No,
second?
yeah,
Second,
yeah.
okay. Any others? Okay, all those in favor?
Well, so now there's two nominations.
Yeah.
And so each of you can cast a vote for one person, because there's one person to be elected. If there's a majority, then that person will be elected. If there's not, it's a tie. That means neither person will be elected, and then you have to start over.
Okay.
And does anybody want to discuss? I mean, there's also that opportunity if you want to have a discussion about why you would or wouldn't want to be chair, or why you would want someone to be chair.
I would like to hear from both people nominated.
Yeah, that's great,
Good.
Ari.
Sure. I guess I'm just going to start with some of my better attributes. I'm very well organized, level-headed. I think I'm well-spoken. I'm willing to listen. I'm thoughtful and pragmatic. I don't have any kids, so I have fewer conflicts, and I think a lot of time to commit to this project. I've been actively supporting the Charter Commission since last June or July. Been to the meetings, helped kind of strategize, brainstorm, come up with ways to get the word out there, get people to vote, and get that question on the ballot. And that included standing outside CVS and Roach Brothers for many, many, many hours, talking to people, educating people, persuading people, listening to people rant for a really long time. And, all in order to get the signatures to get that question on the ballot. And I think I've done, quite a bit of reading. And I just think I'm well equipped to hit the ground running.
So I think this is an important thing for everybody to be included in this. I think the chair is obviously an important position, but I think having 9 of us here and willing to listen to have everybody's opinion obviously mean just as much as the next person, I think is probably the most important thing. I also think one of the major things going into this doesn't matter where this goes for the long run, is I think gonna be kind of bringing in the people from the town, whether it be, you know, the citizens, whether it be the people that actually are in leadership positions now, whether it be selectmen, town department heads. And I think that's my biggest asset, is I think I know the town very well. I think I know its people very well. And I think I may be able to convince, you know, some of the people that maybe are a little bit hesitant about coming in here and speaking about this because they're worried about what may happen. I think that could be my strongest attribute, is bringing the people in that I don't think know too much about this charter. I'm obviously very well versed in what goes on right now in the town, and I think I can help the committee or the commission, you know, go forward. And I think that's going to be one of the major important things if we think that we're going to get anything done.
So do you want to ask if anyone else wants to say anything?
Does anyone else want to say anything?
I thought I was really on the down low with that.
Until she pointed to you.
Give it to Lauren.
So are you ready for a vote?
Yeah, you ready for a vote?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, so you have the two nominations, so you'd say the person that you're going to vote for, and then again, at the end, we'll see if one person has a majority. If one person does, that person's the chair. Oftentimes, the person who does not get selected as the chair is offered in nomination as vice chair, just so that you know, and then you'll select a clerk as well.
Sounds good.
You gonna keep the minutes? You gonna write it down?
The-
The votes?
Yeah, I'll write
Okay.
the votes.
All right, good.
Yes.
All right. So do it with your roll call. You had the roll call, so why don't you just start and do that again like that?
Okay,
Yep.
so just go Janie Goodwin,
I vote for Kevin.
David Haney,
Vote for Laura.
Denise Luciano,
I vote for Laura.
Sandra Olahead,
Laura?
Laura Elsie Parker. Laura?
Oh, I get to vote?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm going to vote for Laura.
Kevin Schleicher,
I'll vote for Kevin.
Keith Silva,
Kevin?
Kerry Snyder,
Laura.
and David Wren.
I vote for Laura.
Okay. So, Laura,
Was elected chair.
you are elected chair.
Congratulations.
I don't know how I feel about that, but thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
I appreciate it. Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Congrats.
Maybe.
So now.
Yeah, I don't, talk to me in a year.
I'll tell her she can do it.
Okay.
So now what can happen is either Lucia could keep going and preside over the election of the vice chair and the clerk, or Laura, you could take over the meeting and do that instead.
Do you have a preference?
You can do it if,
Okay.
I don't mind doing it. I
No,
don't
that's
mind
fine.
doing it,
If-
You're going to
if
keep
you
the
wanna
votes
do-
for now, right?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, I keep the
fine,
votes. Yep.
So I will accept a nomination for vice chair, I think is how this works.
Or is Kevin automatically?
Not automatic.
Okay.
That's
okay.
often the way that it works.
All right.
I'll nominate Kevin Schleicher.
Okay.
I'll second. Yeah.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Can I make a nomination?
Yes?
I nominate Sandy Allerhead.
I'll second it.
So we're going to go through all the names, right, again?
Well, so now you can offer the opportunity to speak,
Okay.
or if people don't want to speak, you can go to a vote, but it's up to you, or deliberation and then a vote.
Would the group like to hear from both parties again?
Sandy, do you want to say anything?
I think, yeah, I would certainly be happy to be vice chair. Again, with Laura, had done a lot of work on getting the research for this to get started. So I certainly am well-versed with the process procedures of all the state regulations. Also consider myself organized, to be able to logically move the meetings forward if ever Laura wasn't here.
No, you guys have heard.
Okay, ready? Go one by one,
Well,
right?
I would ask, you might want to suggest if anyone else has any questions or comments that this is the time.
Thank you. Are there any more discussions or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to just take a moment and talk about Kevin and his, what he really brings to the table in terms of, his position in town, his networking, he knows people. There are going to be a lot of moving parts in terms of getting people in here and scheduling and meeting with people. And I think that his one-to-one relationship and his knowledge of how that works, and I think it's beneficial to the committee to have him in that position. I really do. I think that, I know that this has been a process from, for getting signatures for a long time, getting a lot of signatures. I know how much work was put into it. I appreciate that. I also think that there's, a lot of people who came out and voted for Kevin on the sense that he's here with an open mind. He doesn't have an agenda. He's not coming to the table with anything other than the betterment of Norton. And I think with that in mind and his position in town, I think he is a good fit for vice chair.
Thank you,
If I
Jane.
could just offer something also just in Sandy's favor, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her specifically, and a couple of other people. And I just wanted to make reference to some of the work that she's done. She's actually talked to folks within Franklin, within North Attleboro, and she's done a tremendous amount of research on this particular process and project, and I think that could be a valuable asset as well. Any other discussion? Seeing no questions or further discussion, we'll take a vote.
Do you want Lucia to do the?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Janie Goodwin,
Kevin?
David Heaney,
Kevin?
Denise Luciano,
Sandy.
Sandy,
Sandy?
Laura,
Sandy.
Kevin.
Kevin.
Keith,
Kevin.
Carrie Schneider,
Sandy.
and David Wren.
It's very difficult for me, but I'm going to say Kevin.
Okay. This goes to Kevin. Kevin has 5.
Kevin was elected as vice
Yes,
chair.
Vice chair.
So now you have to move to the clerk. So nominations for the position of clerk.
Okay. Do I hear any nominations for clerk?
Nominate Janie for clerk.
I'll second.
Are there any other nominations for clerk?
I'd like to nominate Sandy.
I'll second.
Should we? Is there any discussion?
Or
About
maybe
the-
Sandy wants to, I don't know if Sandy wants to say anything.
Jane.
Jane wants to say
Sorry.
anything. We heard
Sorry.
Sandy.
Yes.
Certainly I would be happy to take the position of secretary and, keep the minutes and keep in the timeframes. And I'm organized, I'm prepared, I'm always ready. I think it's just part of being a teacher. I'd be happy to do that.
So either way, you're voting for a teacher.
You can't really go wrong.
Yeah.
So now if there's any discussion.
Sorry,
I just
Kevin.
wanted, like I said, for Janie, Janie's obviously well-known in this town. She's obviously on this commission for a reason. She was the highest vote getter, and I understand this, whatever that means or doesn't mean here, but I think that's important. I think the townspeople wanted her to be on this. I think it's important for her to have the position. I know how organized she is. I've known her for a long time. The teaching thing's huge. She just has everything the way she wants it, and I think it's going to be great to have somebody that's organized. I think we're going to end up having a lot of meetings here, and I think it's going to be somebody that even can just keep everything organized in the way that we can refer back to it if we need to.
Spell. And spell.
And spell, yeah.
Yeah, can I make a few comments?
Please.
David Wren. I've got to know Sandy over the last several months working for this project, and I've never met anybody more organized, nor just the ability to keep the group moving forward. And I'd almost consider it a travesty in some ways if she wasn't on the board in some regard, in some position. So that's my feeling. And she's put a lot of time into it.
Any other questions, comments, discussions? Seeing none, Lucia, could you please take the vote?
Yes, ma'am. Janie Goodwin,
Janie?
David Heaney,
Sandy.
Denise Luciano,
Sandy.
Sandra Olahead,
Sandy?
Laura Elsie Parker,
Sandy.
Kevin Schleicher,
Janie.
Keith Silva,
Janie.
Carrie Snyder,
Sandy.
and David Wren.
Sandy?
Sandy, okay, Sandy.
I don't know why either one of you want to do it, but. Notice I did not want a nomination.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, just quickly. So you all have certain statutory responsibilities, and I can wait till after to talk about them all. The most pressing is that you have to hold a public hearing within 45 days. So tonight, before you leave, what?
Within 45 days of today?
45 days from the day you were elected. And so the most pressing thing is to plan the date for that and ensure that you have a quorum that can be there for that. As well, typically, most commissions will try to figure out what day it's easiest for or evening it's easiest for them to meet, and try to plan out a few meetings into the future. If there's a day, for example, it might be that this room is available on one particular night, and so that might make the most sense to try and start from there. So those are some of those considerations. But you really, the public hearing and at least one meeting is what I would say is your minimum to leave here. And then, we can talk about the other things when you are ready. I'm happy to. I wanted to tell you about the open meeting, public records, and conflict of interest laws. And I also wanted to go over kind of what the way charter commissions typically start off and the process that they go through, and perhaps talk a little bit about the kinds of things that charters can do that state law can't, so that you have a kind of 30,000-foot picture and you guys can drill down from there.
Do you have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. What's the context of the meeting in 45 days, just so we know what we're moving towards? Is it just like we were at that point, because we're probably not going to be very far yet?
It's a public hearing, so what it's really meant to do is allow members of the public to come in and talk to you about things that they think are important.
Okay.
Oftentimes, the commission will truly just, thank people for being elected and talk about, as Ken was saying, talk about coming at things with an open mind and being willing to listen. And that's typically the introduction for that meeting. And then members of the public speak until they're done, and then you guys close the hearing and go home.
Okay.
So that's really just an opportunity to get information.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sitting here looking at the calendar and trying to do math, but do you know offhand when 45 days from election day was?
I can tell you.
June 7th?
Yeah.
We have June 7th.
What was election day?
23rd, right?
April 23rd, yeah, town election.
We basically have a month roughly to do it.
Yeah.
30, so figure it out.
I put in what date calculator and up came pregnancy calculator. That scared me, I've got to tell you. So, I'm sorry, April 23rd?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got June.
I'm just going to do the official,
38, be the 7th of June, right?
Yep.
That's a Friday.
Well, it's just
Mine's
within 45.
We have to get it in by
Yeah.
that
yeah,
date.
right, yes.
Yeah.
So,
And we're also bordering quite a few other town meetings along the way.
that's true. Could do one before that town meeting.
Well, annual town meeting's the 15th.
We have to
And-
give a certain amount of notice
Yeah.
for it.
What I-
I mean, the 15th.
What I actually meant is you could schedule it before the town meeting, like earlier in the day.
Oh,
You know, a lot of people will be coming out for town meeting. That might be a good way to get a lot of attendees.
It's not a bad idea.
Isn't it?
So
10?
That's less than a week away, is
I
it?
think it's
That's
10 days to get it.
I was thinking the June 3rd.
Oh,
Not annual.
gotcha.
So if we did that and there was enough interest such that the conversations went up until the time of town meeting, so I mean, cut people off, would that be, it seems like that would not be optimal.
You could certainly continue to a time, date, and place certain. That's at least 48 hours following that, following the posting. So you could plan 2 dates. for the public hearing, you could plan it today, and you could say, we'll do June 3rd from whatever time to whatever time. And if needed, we'll continue that meeting until time, date, and place certain. And then you can post for both now, which means you could hold both of those meetings, back to back even if you wanted to.
What,
Like,
what time is the
7
June 3rd
o'clock.
meeting? Oh, 7 o'clock.
Yeah. It's at the Norton High School, would we have availability of a room within the high school, do
Just
you
so
think?
you'll know, the June 3rd scheduled town meeting right now is scheduled to be in the gym.
Gym, right.
Yeah. So as far as a room in the school, you'll have to check with the school. I don't book for the schools.
Okay,
Okay?
You can certainly ask.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do the meeting at 5:30 prior to, and see if like maybe the auditorium is available. And if anybody wants to show up early for the town meeting, they can go to the public hearing with us and then go to the gymnasium for it. I'm sure the auditorium will probably be available just because of overflow.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they wouldn't book the auditorium the same night as the town meeting, just on the inclination that if it does go over, they're gonna have to move people into that room.
That's correct. Yeah.
So,
It gives an hour and a half at least to try to, yeah.
Yep.
And it is possible, and I know it seems, it would be surprising sitting here today to think perhaps you won't get as many people as that, but sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't with these public hearings. So having the opportunity is great. If you get more people than you can handle that night, you could continue, and if you don't, then you'll at least have, given people the opportunity to go to one place
I think
to
it's a
do
good
it.
opportunity to piggyback on
Yeah.
a place where people are likely going to be coming, or hopefully coming.
Would that continuation also have to be done by the 7th? Or do we just have to have the first meeting?
Yeah, I think you just have to open it. I think that'll be fine.
Okay.
That's a little bit of a form. It's really meant to require you to move forward. I think as long as you are, it being done before the 7th would.
Are we allowed to meet in advance of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What happens if you don't have the May meeting? Oh, we're gonna have a town meeting, I'm sorry, I was thinking about the other one.
Well, the June one,
Actually.
the June one is the town hall.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Even if
definitely
they-
scheduled.
Even if they, I mean, as of now, it is, if it changes, it doesn't mean that we have to change, you know what I mean?
I think
That's
Because
Very
they
well,
cancel, so.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it would probably hamper the attendance on our part, but
Yeah.
there's no reason for us to start switching days, especially from that close time out from the 7th, so.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be any worse than any other random day we picked anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, except we would be doing this at 5:30, which is
Yeah.
probably not all that conducive to getting a lot of people from town to show up.
It starts at 5:30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, our meeting is at 5:30.
Right, but somebody could show up at 6.
I kind of view people will
Yeah.
come in and state their piece
Yeah.
and,
Then move
And-
on.
yeah.
Yeah.
You actually do need to, post publish a notice in the newspaper. So that's more than just posting on the, in the way that'd be required under the open meeting law. So you need your notice posted at least 10 days in advance. So whoever is taking care of logistics should find out from the school whether that space is available, and if so, do you guys know when they go to print? Do you have a relationship with, or the manager's office with?
When the warrant goes out to print?
No, the
Or
newspaper.
The newspaper, oh, I have Jen. Do you want me to ask Jen?
I mean.
Public hearing, I have no idea,
Okay.
I don't post public hearings, I'm sorry.
So, but Jen does?
I think she might.
Okay, so we can look into that for you after.
Planning will do it.
So logistically, within these meetings, do we need a motion and a vote for all of these decisions, or is it?
So that's one of the things that you have to talk about, is how formal you want things to be. And, sometimes that's a reflection of people wanting clear rules to be in place so that it's easier to manage. At some points, there obviously can be some contentious discussions because people feel strongly about things one way or another. So it is nice to have some level of rules and formality. At the same time, you don't want the rules to get in the way of discussion. So, yes, I take a vote on setting the date of the public hearing, subject to availability, date and time, but I don't think you need to have a vote on everything. If you guys decide, for example, that your next meeting is going to be whatever date, and everyone around the table says yes, the chair could say, okay, by unanimous consent, then we're going to have the meeting on whatever day, or ask for a vote. So it's really up to you how how useful you think that is. A lot of committees use Robert's Rules of Order, but, I mean, my personal feeling is that's a lot for what you really hope will be a working opportunity and relationship,
Yeah.
and you probably don't need to layer that on.
It's very full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the opinion that if we all seem to be working in the same direction, you know, I'll just simply say, is everybody in agreement? If somebody is not, then we'll take a formal vote.
Yep.
If that works for everyone?
It's okay with me.
Makes sense?
Okay.
Yep. Madam Chair, as you get forward into making actual decisions about provisions of a charter, then you would want to take a vote.
Yep.
Because that, you want to be able to go back and say, yes, we voted on this, this was a decision that we made. But things like the date for the next meeting and that kind of thing are just not really the same level.
Understood. Thank you. Do I have a motion for June 3rd at 5:30 PM, subject to availability and notice?
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Everybody's in agreement?
Nice job.
Thank you.
You're
No,
going
no,
to do
no,
it at what?
I know, at the
the
school.
school
No,
auditorium.
I mean, for your regular meetings, are you planning to meet here so that they're televised?
They'll go somewhere else to
I think that would be
televise also.
Okay.
It'd probably be good.
I think that would be optimal.
They have to be
Right.
televised, correct?
I don't think.
I think your bylaws say that
just have
if
to be taped.
possible, yeah.
I think they have to be taped, not necessarily
Televised.
televised, as long as they're available to watch.
I think it's more of a question of when's the room available and does that work for your schedules? And if it does, then, then it seems to make sense. If not, then you'd have to talk about other locations. Lucia, do you know the schedule in here?
It's usually in here, every other Thursday is the Board of Selectmen, which I'm sure you all know that. Sometimes they hold a special meeting, so they kind of really leave Thursdays open just in case. But you've also got the upstairs meeting room, and you've also got the break room that would be, you could all fit in there.
And we can film in all of those places?
Oh, no, Shane. Can you film upstairs, in the meeting room upstairs?
Not live, but I can always film.
Oh, okay, film but not live,
The audio is not very good up there.
okay?
Just
So this room is probably the best.
This
for us
room
to-
is probably the best,
And the
yeah.
size of the group, probably.
Yeah.
And the number of people we're probably going to have in front of us on numerous occasions.
And if we have public, at least we have some seats. I mean, we go to a small conference room.
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough to get anybody to watch.
Yeah.
all the library.
Library,
Or the
yeah.
library.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
And what other nights is this room occupied? Like, I know FinCom is in here
Yeah.
on Mondays, right?
Wednesday, I believe, aren't they Wednesday? Right now, they're holding a lot of meetings.
Every night.
FinCom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you might want to check the board or give me a call, and I'll let you know what meetings are going on. I'll give you an update on the room bookings and what meetings are going on, if you want to give me a jingle tomorrow.
Madam,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Madam Chair, perhaps you want to see if anyone has a standing meeting during the week so that that night doesn't work for them, and then you can try to start coordinating.
Yeah.
You could also, even though it sounds silly, but you could do a Google, what are those called, a Google poll?
Yep. I had actually put together just a contact sheet that we can hopefully all fill in, and I'll type it up and send it around to everyone so we know how to get a hold of everybody.
Great.
But on there, I had kind of the typical work schedule, so we could, work around those types of things, especially if we were bringing in people from, other towns. We're going to be subject to their availability. We want to make sure we have the most number of people available. Yes?
I'd just like to say, if we did have, if we had to meet somewhere and we couldn't have it televised, we could have it at the highway department. Just if we needed to meet, in the place to meet, we could meet down there.
Okay.
But I have no cameras that I know of.
If there's space both to meet and at Kevin's point, have people who can attend as well.
He's mobile.
Okay.
He's
Probably
mobile.
a few, but
There's
it
room for
ain't, ain't real big. In case we need to have a meeting and someone want to come down, it's fine, but not a lot, but just if we had to have a meeting, at least have a place.
Yeah, okay.
Do we know, does anybody know, I don't know of any meetings that are hard scheduled at the library. Maybe something that we know going forward.
It would be a good place so the public could probably come in as well.
There's plenty of parking.
What are their hours?
They're open late a couple of
But
nights a week.
they're going to change their hours, they're changing their hours.
Oh, right, for the summer.
Summertime they go
They're
down.
going to be longer hours, I
Longer.
believe, yeah.
If I may, the community room there is separate from the library.
Yeah.
So they hold a lot of meetings
At night.
after hours,
Oh.
where there's no access to the library, but there's access to restrooms
Yeah.
in the meeting
Oh,
room.
okay.
That's perfect.
Oh.
And you guys lock up, I don't know how the keys are dealt with, but
Yeah, we talk
I've
about
been doing that for a long time.
Oh,
So it seems
okay.
like we have a fair number of options for locations. Should we start with?
Day.
The
the
schedule of the
days that
day.
are just-
Yeah.
We need to block off and then we can figure out where to go.
Agreed.
Yeah,
I
agree.
think Thursdays in general are probably, if people wanted to attend the Board of Selectmen meeting, a few of us are on the IDC, which right now is scheduled for Thursdays as well. If we could avoid Thursdays, any other day is fine by me.
I
Any,
was
any
actually-
hard, with that?
I was actually gonna ask if we could do Thursdays.
Every other Thursday.
Yeah, so, and I only asked that 'cause I travel for work fairly frequently, and that travel usually, it's usually front-loaded in the week, and if anything, it's like a Monday through Thursday, and be back for Thursday night.
Maybe we should also, at the same time, discuss frequency of meetings. I think we have a lot of work. We have a very long time frame, but there's a lot of work that we need to accomplish. And I'd like to try and stay ahead of it and front-load that. In looking at North Attleboro and how often they met, it was almost 3 times a month during the course of their process. So I think we're potentially looking at maybe, if not every week, then 3 times a month. And that's going to conflict with our other engagements on Thursdays at least.
Can I just ask a question? Like, for instance, is there any way that we can get approved for like a third party? For instance, like, calling in, say somebody was away, they, phone
Remote
in.
participation, has
Yeah,
the board
exactly,
approved
remote
that?
participation, yeah.
I'm not certain, but I think the Board of Selectmen has approved remote participation, and that means that anybody who's away can participate, they can call in, as long as you can hear each other, so
Yeah.
it needs to be able to be heard both ways, and you have a quorum present, physically present here. So if you have a quorum physically present, so 5 members, then you can have any of the other members call into the meeting.
Okay.
I think that's going to be,
Excellent to know.
Extremely important, because
Yeah,
I
agree.
if
I
asking
agree.
9 people to show up, like you said, I agree with you, it's probably going to be 3 times.
Yeah.
It's like herding cats.
Exactly. Obviously, everybody's schedule's a mess. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way
Yeah.
around it. But if the ability to be able to take, whether it be an hour and a half, however long the meeting goes, and be able to call here on speakerphone or on some type of conference call,
Yeah.
and the ability to participate, as long as you have a physical quorum, I think is going to be important. Because there's just no way we're going to have 9 people show up
Every time.
every single time.
No, I
So that
agree.
idea
That was
is
actually
great.
one of the questions I had, was whether the board had actually authorized remote participation.
I think they have.
I was reading about it, and I've talked to Mike about it, and I do believe you can. I also know that the planning board, what they've done there is, if somebody cannot make a meeting, then what they're doing is they're watching it on the next day on cable access, and then they fill out a form.
That's because that's because of a statute.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's because of statute,
Yeah.
okay.
If the selectmen haven't voted on that yet, or haven't taken that,
In the state.
would it be the ability for them to say, well, we haven't done it, but we'll allow you to do it?
I know we're just being conversational. I want to just make sure that's okay for me to just be going back and forth. Essentially, they can't differentiate between different boards. So if they say, yes, the Charter Commission can do it, then really they're saying, yes, everyone in town can do it. So we can follow up on that. That's another thing that somebody should take care of.
Isn't that in the open meeting law, this
It-
remote participation?
It is in the open meeting law, but it has to be permitted by the chief executive, which here would be the Board of Selectmen. Madam Chair, you mentioned the North Attleboro Charter Commission, and I don't know if this group knows that I actually was hired there as special counsel to assist them with their process. And they were exceptionally organized. Mark Fisher is a wonder, he really is. So that may be a good resource to talk to about process. And their election, I think, is June 3rd. So it'll be interesting because their charter just passed and they're having an election for town council.
Can I ask what other, I think you may have also worked for Watertown?
Watertown and Plymouth, and I mean, it's in Webster, and there's a very large list. I was thinking, if it's okay with you, I could, so my background, I came from the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, where I was in the Public Records Division and then legal counsel to the State Elections Division, Public Records and then Elections, which is a town clerk's kind of thing. And so I have been, providing advice to town clerks on those issues forever. One of those things that came up because of elections is charters. And so I've been working with cities and towns on charters, helping them to write them and amend them, et cetera, for a really long time. I came to KP Law in the year 2000. And so because of my expertise in charter election questions, I was immediately thrown into dealing with charters and bylaws. The firm represents about 130 cities and towns in the Commonwealth as town council or as town council or city solicitor. And the reason I tell you that is because we have the opportunity to see charters, bylaws of any and all kinds. If you say to me, gee, we were thinking about X, I say to you, aha, I know a great provision, whether it's a Watertown charter, this charter, that charter. Dedham and Westwood, that I helped them totally redo their charters at Groton. What I thought might make sense is to kind of tell you what I see most charter commissions do, and I think you've already kind of referred to some of those pieces, but that might help you figure out what your schedule can or should be and kind of what the next steps might be. So the first thing that one of the charter commissioners in Plymouth was an engineer, and he told me how he approaches every single problem, and that is educate, diagnosis, design, and promote. And so the first thing to do, in this kind of a circumstance is to educate both yourselves and the public about what it is that you're doing. And that's essentially to talk about what the principles of the review process are. You're an elected charter commission. Most elected charter commissions do kind of a top to bottom, soup to nuts review. Typically, there's a difference between going through your charter that you have now and making changes and or writing a new charter. And those are two different things. So before you embark on either of those paths, what is useful is to talk to people about what works and what doesn't work. Now, when we say people, who are we talking about? We're talking about town officials, town employees, and the public, board and committee members, and then also board and committee members or officials from other towns who've gone through similar processes because they all have something to offer. It's really important to recognize that in Massachusetts, a charter can do virtually anything that you want it to. But if you go out and look at the charters that cities and towns have adopted, you'll see they often look a lot alike. There was a time when there was kind of a model charter that was used and people just copied it from town to town to town. And I think what they discovered is that didn't really meet their needs. So in one town, they'd have a great distrust of the chief executive's ability to appoint a town manager, let's say, and so they would require the appointment of a screening committee. In another town where they never had any problems with a chief executive choosing a town administrator, they'd have the same screening committee language, but then they wouldn't want it later. And then why do we have that? So it's really important to try and identify what makes Norton Norton and what you want to make sure you keep about Norton, not just about the actual positions, but about the feel, the way people interact with each other, and what your goal is. Is it to streamline government? Is it to change the form of government? And why? So, saying we want this type of government or that type of government without first saying what works and what doesn't work is typically not helpful. Because then you're looking at someone else's charter and you're saying, oh, this is a great idea, but it may not be a great idea for you. So I really strongly urge you, look at the other town stuff, read it, but don't think that any one of those charters is the right charter for Norton. And you should definitely start with your own. I mean, there's no question that there's stuff in the charter that could be updated, but you should, yes?
So a question, it's called Chapter C. Chapter C of what? And
Chapter
where is
C?
Chapter A and B?
Oh, in the
Charter is Chapter C.
It's just C charter.
Okay.
It's not, that's not, the way that your bylaws and your charter are organized, and so that's the other thing I want to talk about. That's not necessarily related to anything. And one of the things that we talked about in North Attleboro, and I came in, they had already kind of done a lot of the meeting with other officials, and I came in much more at the time when they actually wanted to try and decide what they wanted to do and write it. And what I told them is, don't worry about what the words are going to say, because that's, the job of whoever's going to actually scribe the document. What you really want to focus on is what you're looking for. So it's one thing to say, we're going to, we don't know whether we want the same or a different kind of government. So then you want to learn, right, about what does and doesn't work here, what does and doesn't work in other communities. You want to talk to communities that have changed forms of government, Franklin or North Attleboro or Amherst just changed from a town meeting to a town council. So you want to have those conversations and meet with those people. The other thing that you really need to understand is the difference between a weak town administrator manager and a strong town administrator manager, and the role of the chief executive in connection with that. So those things are essentially the things that are set in state law right now. Okay, a town administrator acts by and through the Board of Selectmen, and under state law, that's it. You can't give them the powers of any other member of the executive. If they delegate it, it's still their action. Okay, but under a charter, you can change all of that. And so, if you start off saying, "Oh, we want X," well, or "Oh, they do Y over there," then you're not really thinking about how it is that you might want things here. So. My recommendation on that is that you look at what people's functions are and what they actually do and what you're looking for them to do differently. Who does it? Who's answerable to who? What amount of control you want to give to a manager or another chief executive that's different than what they would have under state law. So, for example, under state law, the Board of Selectmen has appointing authority for virtually all positions that are not elected, for elected boards. So Board of Health, typically under state law, would appoint their health agent. The Planning Board would appoint the planner. The town clerk appoints assistant town clerk, and like that. Now, your charter's already made changes. So you want to look at that and see, what does our town manager have in terms of authority, and what would we want that position to have? Things like signing warrants for payment. State law says that can only happen in a certain way. And so if you want to change that, you have to change it in a charter. So looking at what people do is very useful. And things, who decides who's hiring new personnel? Who decides what the hours are at town hall? Who who can be elected or appointed? Are there any limitations on that? Are you going to have recall? All of these things are functional things. And so it's really important to take a look at that. Once you're taking a look at that, so you meet with the boards and committees, you have in people from different types of town governments. And the Mass Municipal Managers Association has a form of government subcommittee, and they will come in and talk to you, a town administrator from a small town, a strong town administrator, a strong town manager. So it's very useful. And they'll show you how the town manager's authority is on a sliding scale. And it's up to you guys to decide whether you think your sliding scale is right where it is, or whether it should go back, change one way or another. The other thing to be thinking about when you're looking at government is who you want to work here in the future. And that's something that doesn't necessarily hit you right away, but a lot of professional town managers, they want the power to hire and fire. So that's something you should really think about. If they don't have the power to hire and fire, and supervise, then you have a kind of disjointed, or at least in theory, a disjointed governance structure. Now, all governance structures were like that previously. With no charter, everybody's kind of in charge of their own area. So that's another thing to look at. Do you want the Board of Assessing, the assessing department, do you want that department head answerable to the chief executive or to the assessing board? Are you looking to consolidate financial functions, or land use boards, assistants, all of that type of stuff? That's all functional. So those are things that are really useful to look at. Let's see, responsibilities, reporting, design. The design phase is the drafting of a new charter or the revising of your charter. the way that North Attleboro did it, and actually the elected Plymouth Charter Commission did as well, is they kind of looked at it in the order that most charters go. So you need to think about who's going to be the legislative body, who's going to be the executive body, and then how you want things to be organized. And then you can fill in the rest. What bodies are going to be elected versus what bodies are going to be appointed. That's a major issue. I can tell you right now that elected officials do not like necessarily to have their positions changed to appointed. And if you want to do that, and sometimes there's good reason for it, you really need to be thoughtful about how to do it. So you want the charter to build in transition provisions so you don't wind up in shock. And I will tell you, just for an example, you can look at Amherst's transition provisions, and they actually wound up in court because their transition provisions said we could do an election here, we could do it there, and this or that, and that caused people significant consternation. Town meeting couldn't really just be comfortable with that concept of we could try to do it like this or like that, and so they wound up being sued over that. So that's something to think about. Framingham had a recount of their charter commission election, which immediately set their charter commission in a kind of a, I'm sorry, with in their election to go from a city to a town. So on the charter itself, that actual vote, it was subject to a recount. And part of that, that vote was so close, it's because, this idea of what you can sell, what's going to appeal to people, and how you get that message out. So that's something else to think about. You do want to identify problems and things that could work better. And so communication is a really big issue. When you look at the charter, you're really looking for that. Who is communicating when? The budget process is another significant issue. The concept of being too detailed in the charter versus being detailed enough is a big one as well. You don't want your charter to have due dates for every single thing, and then if people miss them, then what you hear is, well, they don't care about the charter, nobody follows the charter doesn't mean anything. A charter is supposed to set aspirational goals for town government, for sure, and it's one thing to say, we like the budget process to start on February 1st, or whatever it might be. It's another thing to say, and it shall be provided to this person on this day, and that person on that day. And once you start loading that stuff in, it's very hard for town government to function. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Okay, so what are the kind of reasons for a charter and what could the charter do? Anything in your town bylaws that's inconsistent with a charter are immediately superseded by a charter, okay? Anything in the general laws that are inconsistent with a charter are deemed consistent by the charter. So the charter, by the process. The charter itself is deemed consistent with state law. So if you look at state law and it says the Board of Health appoints the health agent, a charter can change that. And it can, and that's its job, actually. So you want to look at Chapter 43B, Section 20, which you can just Google, and it'll come right up at the Mass Laws. And that has a whole list of all the things. You can change appointing authority. You can change confirmation authority. You can change size, 43B20. You can change the size of the body. You can change the functions of the body. You can take jobs from one person and divide them into two, or you can take jobs from two people and make them into one, okay? So there is a significant amount of flexibility when it comes to structure of government. And that's, again, why just taking someone else's doesn't really do you right for that. So you're talking about the executive, Board of Selectmen, town manager form of government, that's one version, Board of Selectmen, town administrator. And there's really no difference between a town administrator and town manager if it's created by a special act or a charter, except for what's in the charter, okay? So there's nothing in state law that says if you do these things, you're a town manager. State law says you act by and through the Board of Selectmen. So as soon as you take power from the Board of Selectmen and give it to the manager, that's what makes the person a manager for purposes of the general laws, regardless of whether you call them an administrator or a manager. It's what they do that matters, okay? So there's that. There's representative town meetings with a town manager, and there's town councils with, or a municipal council with mayors or managers, or both even. I don't know if you guys have heard about planned forms of government. Is that, anybody heard about that? So a lot before the mid-1960s, there were these planned forms of government, A, B, C, D, and E, and they contain many variations on forms of executive and legislative bodies. There's even a bicameral option, which only the city of Everett had until about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. But those basic forms are useful to look at, and I'm going to send you guys a packet of stuff so that you can look it all over. Yeah, but, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'll send it all to you. But the thing that's important to remember is that you can take those things that would typically fall in the executive bucket and divide them up, or you can consolidate them. So that, again, is up to you. And those standard forms of government are useful for ideas. You can't adopt one of those anymore, that's why we do this, but they're useful to look at. You can use a charter to create departments, okay? So in some places, they wanted a Department of Municipal Finance, and they didn't have a Department of Municipal Finance, and there's only a few ways to create it under the general laws, so they formalized that in the charter. So finance, inspections, licensing, community planning, a number of communities have consolidated all of their land use boards into a planning and land use department, where they try to have the support staff be there for everybody rather than just for one or the other of the boards. So that's another thing. Department of Public Works. Statutory authority, as I said, you can combine them or change the manner of selection. So sometimes you have elected, appointed boards. You can make a board elected and appointed. You could add 2 members, 2 appointed members to a 3-member elected board, or 2 appointed members to a 5-member elected board, or take a 5-member elected board and make it 3 elected and 2 appointed. And actually, North Attleboro did some of that. You can give these officials authority for things that they otherwise wouldn't have. You want to think about removal issues, both recall of elected officials, but also removal. If someone's appointed for a term found in law, then the only way you can remove them is if the law says that they can be removed. So anytime we put into a charter that person shall be appointed for a term of 3 years or whatever, unless we have another provision that says, and they may be removed for cause or after a hearing, without that additional language, they're yours. Okay, that's it. From an employment perspective, you want to bear that in mind. Then the other thing to think about are things that aren't necessarily found in law. So ethical obligations, disclosure requirements, minute requirements, agenda requirements, conduct of multiple member bodies, publication requirements for the warrant and notice of town meeting. If you stick with the town meeting form of government, a lot of towns are trying to modernize that because they do a publication or a printing, and it's very expensive and it's very time consuming and leads to problems. Hearing requirements, so setting fees and perhaps putting in a requirement that before a fee be set, rather than go to town meeting, that you could, elected and appointed officials could do that after hearing, require them to be on file with the town clerk, that kind of stuff. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else. Okay, so typically this public hearing that's coming up, that would be an opportunity, as I said, for the public to come in and tell you about things that they're concerned with. You know, a lot of times you hear things like, we don't like that our trash doesn't get picked up on time, or, you know, our roads have been bad for years. So, and those are important, and you need to think about why they're complaining. Is there someone that they need to talk to who they don't have access to? You know, is it unclear on the website? Is it unclear in the job description whose job that is? So there's really nuggets of important stuff in every complaint. So you'll take that. The next thing is to plan out your visits, you know, who you want to have come in. So you're going to want to make a list of all the boards and committees that you think you want to hear from, and town officials and employees. So sometimes department heads will come in, or, you know, maybe there's an employee who's been here for years and years and years, and you feel like this is a person we all, you know, everybody knows and trusts. It'd be great to hear from them. So you plan that out. You can talk to the MMA, municipal government group, and then also to any city or town that you think would be helpful. A lot of times people will choose a smallish town, a bigger town, a very structured town, an unstructured town, just so you get some of that variation. And the opportunity during this time is to say, you know, if you start hearing things that over and over are suggesting certain issues, okay, so that's something that kind of goes on your wish list of things to talk about that are important. And you can start building that. And that's Mark, I'm sure, can help share some of that with you. He was really great. He kept a a spreadsheet of issues that were raised, and then they tried to kind of identify, okay, this is a theme, this is something we need to look at. And so that's a really useful thing. And as you're doing that, you may also be having discussions about, maybe you start with the executive branch, or maybe you start with the legislative branch. And so you can start talking about that. Do people have preferences? Do they have ideas? Do they like certain things about that? I'd also suggest that you guys go to, if you're thinking of changing to a representative town meeting or a town council form of government, go to some of those meetings. Do not think that you know what it's like because you read about it in a newspaper. It is exceptionally different, and every town is different from the next, so go to a few. And if anybody needs to know town meetings in the next few months, I can tell you when they are.
It's like me, I know. The meetings, I go and schedule the meetings, I go to all the meetings, I take notes.
Yeah.
So, town council meeting, right, you attend them. You meeting, couple of meetings, what it's like.
So there's real value in that. And go to a town council meeting. They meet every week or every other week. Town meetings are a little different, but there's a number of them coming up. So Dedham, May 20th, not that far from here. I could give you more of a list, though. So you look at those things over the next few months. You read what there is for you to read. So if you guys have an initial conversation and you say, well, we want to look at a town council charter, we want to look at, or 2 or 3, or we want to look at some representative town meeting charters, I can give you examples of ones that are actually pretty decent, and you can take a look at those, or on your own, you can do that research. And Mark did a lot of research on that. I'm sure, as I said, that he would tell you the ones that they looked at. So that's the next few months. I think at this stage, people or commissions do tend to meet every other week, or 3 times a week or something at the beginning. A month, that's every week that won't work. And the benefit of that is, number one, you get to know each other. It's really important to be able to work together. And I can't stress enough the importance of being civil and respectful, and I'm not suggesting that anyone here is about to break out in rude behavior, but it can get heated. So it's very nice to kind of have a working relationship before you start debating those really important, bigger picture issues. From there, once you have all this information, then it's time to start really kind of settling in on how you want to move forward. If what you all think after you listen to everyone is, we like what we have, we just think it's not working that well, so we want to update what we have now, then you get out the charter that you have now, and you go through it section by section and update the parts that you think need updating. And you could look at it, oh, we heard people don't know where to complain about their trash. Well, we want there to be a person whose job that is. Let's put in this position. Or, we want the town manager to sign warrants for payment so that the Board of Selectmen doesn't have to come in and do, whatever it is, and you can talk about all those things. There's trends, I can share some of that stuff with you. If you want a town council form of government or a representative town meeting, you're really talking about changing significant portions of your charter. It doesn't mean you can't use the parts of it that aren't that, but you may want to start by looking at these other communities and deciding, do you want a small town meeting, representative town meeting? Do you want a large representative town meeting? Do you want, a town council? Do you want a smaller town council? Do you want a larger town council? What are the benefits? What are the detriments? What do you think you get? What do you lose? And so you can start having those conversations. And then, at some point, you will run out of, you'll be at a place where you guys feel pretty strongly, okay, this group likes this and this group likes that, but we need to move forward. So we'll try to do something that's comfortable for the greatest number, and move forward with that. And it doesn't mean that the people whose choices aren't selected as the thing to move forward should disengage or not be involved, because a charter is made up of a lot of different pieces, and so you really can kind of fight for the pieces that are important to you regardless of how things go as it progresses. Once we were about a year in North Attleboro, I basically started writing after every decision group that they made. So they would hand me, and sometimes I'd go to the meetings and sometimes I wouldn't, and in Dedham I went to every single meeting. It was an appointed charter committee. I would listen to what they said, and then I would go back and write down what I thought they were saying and give it back to them, and they'd say, yeah, that is what we want, that's not what we want. In North Attleboro, they would tell me, this person is going to appoint this person, make that work. And so I go in and draft that. Then I can send those back out to the group, and the drafter can send that back out to the group. And then when you come back the next time, you talk about the changes that you want in that group, and you can move on to the next thing. So, again, start with the legislative or executive. Those are going to be the bigger picture issues. But be listening to all of the things that people say as you go forward, and making that list. I think that's really important. Let us also talk a little bit about the open meeting law, public records, and conflict of interest law. This is a public body. It's found in the general laws, so it's subject to the open meeting law, and I'm sure you got they got a copy of it?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have your copy of it. The open meeting law is a hard law to comply with, okay? It's hard because you have to put together an agenda at least 48 hours in advance that includes the items that you want to talk about, okay? Now, what does that mean, the items? The law says topics, but the AG interprets it as items. So that means something specific, okay? You can't just say, discuss charter business, because everything that you do is charter business. It has to be like, tonight we're going to talk about the function of the Board of Health, the Board of Assessors, and the Board of whatever. We're going to have a meeting with so-and-so from Town X, and we're going to deliberate and approve the minutes that we took of the last meeting and make any updates to X, Y, or Z thing. That's specific, okay? A person should be able to read that and know whether they want to come to your meeting or not, okay? Now, that group of things are the things that you know in advance, and it's actually what's in the chair's head. The chair reasonably anticipates discussing, okay? So that is automatically allowed to be discussed if and when the chair recognizes a person to be heard. Especially people that are in the audience have no right to participate in your meetings. The open meeting law doesn't say the general public has a right to participate. They have a right to listen and to observe. They don't have a right to talk. So sometimes a charter commission will decide for the first 10 minutes of every meeting, we'll take comments from the public. Or they'll say at the end, we'll take it at first 10 or the last 10 minutes of the meeting. And that's really the public's chance to have a say. Some boards and committees will, and this isn't just Charter Commission, will say it's okay to talk about things that are on the agenda, and some say, we'd prefer if you don't talk about what's on the agenda, talk about whatever you want. We're going to listen to you. We're not going to respond. We're not going to talk about the issues that you're raising. And if they're important to us that we have more opportunity to talk about them, we'll put them on the next meeting agenda. The benefit of that is that you don't go back and forth with them. Because a lot of times, especially when someone's bringing something up that you haven't had an opportunity to think about, and then you're kind of put into a position where you react versus ponder and provide a more reasoned response in the future. So the agenda is very important, and it has to be filed with the town clerk's office. Where do you guys post?
We post on the website.
On the website. At least 48 weekday hours prior to the meeting, okay? If something comes to the chair's attention after that, let's just say the Franklin Town manager is going to come in and they cancel, and very disappointing. You prepare your agenda, nothing against the Franklin Town manager. You prepare your agenda for the next week without the Franklin Town manager on there. But then they call that morning and say, "Hey, I can actually make it." You couldn't have reasonably anticipated that he was going to come, so it's fine for him to come and talk. It's what's reasonably anticipated. What you have to do is update your agenda as soon as possible, okay? The AG prefers for every single thing that's discussed to be shown on the agenda. It's the AG's preference, it's not the law, because these things that aren't reasonably anticipated can be brought up, okay? If you include like new business and old business, that just has to be for things that are unanticipated. It can't be that last week we talked about the appointing authority of the town manager, and this week we don't have that on the agenda, but someone wants to bring it up, so they bring it up under old business. That's not good enough, okay? It has to be something that wasn't anticipated. All right, so that's the posting and the form of the agenda. And Lucia can give you some examples as well if you haven't seen agendas. But do you guys have a form that people can fill out?
Yeah, there's a template.
Okay,
There's
so you use the
right on
template.
the website.
So there's that. Then there's minutes. And so minutes of meetings have to also be as specific as possible to allow somebody who hasn't been at the meeting to know what went on. So it doesn't mean a transcript, but it does mean something substantial. So if questions are asked, not every question has to be in there, but especially if you have guests and you're asking questions and getting responses, you want the gist of what they're saying to make it into the minutes. Minutes never need to include words of anger, or it can say there was a heated discussion, or several strong opinions were shared. I once went to court where a recording secretary had included, in fact, words of a heated nature, and the judge pulled us to the front and was like, Attorney Goldberg, who are your clients? It's like, who are these people? I'm sorry. So you want to be thoughtful about what the minutes look like. You do have to approve them, as Lucia said, within the next 3 meetings or 30 days, whichever is later. Okay? The best possible choice is to approve your minutes every week from the week before. If you slow down, if you forget, if you don't do it a few weeks in a row, it is then the worst chore ever. I mean, number one, writing them up turns into a giant scene. And number two, let's just say, hypothetically, someone's like, I talked for 40 minutes. This person talked for 3 minutes. Their paragraph is longer. I wish mine was longer. I want my statement in there. And you think I'm making this up, but I'm not. It's better to do it when it's fresh and just get it out of the way. Okay, so that's my strong recommendation, is that you keep your minutes as you go. It's also good because it lets you guys revisit where you were the week before and kind of be prepared for that next piece. So you have to take minutes of your meetings. They have to have enough substance for someone that isn't present to be able to know what happened. You need to list every member who's present and every member who's absent. If, in fact, someone's participating remotely, you have to list that they're participating remotely. And you also have to, if they're participating remotely, take every vote as a roll call vote. Why? Because that person can't see, you can't see them. Okay, so that is that. Any person has the right to tape a meeting if they want to, but they have to notify you that they're doing it. And the chair should also notify the body that and the attendees that taping is going on.
We have to allow it.
I'm sorry?
We have to allow it.
You do have to allow it. You don't have to allow, and I have war stories that we don't have time for, but, someone can't come up and shove a tape recorder in your face, and they can't set up their video camera right here in the middle so it's distracting everyone. But they can put their phone on the table so that it can catch the audio, okay? So as chair, you have the right to tell them where they can place their camera or video, and as chair, you also decide when they get to speak. If a person is asked to stop speaking and they don't, they get a warning. If they refuse to stop speaking after a warning, you can ask them to sit down. And if they don't, you actually can have them removed. It's not ideal. Typically, I would say if things get to a point like that and people are upset, it's better to take a break. Just say and the chair doesn't need to wait for a motion for that. The chair can say, we're going to have a 10-minute recess. We'll reconvene at whatever time. So use your judgment on those things. Of course, if anyone feels scared or concerned, that is a time to bring someone in. And sometimes, people get really worked up about things that you wouldn't expect. And so it's good to just, understand what your process is going to be if something arises like that. The final topic to be aware of is the conflict of interest law. And charter commissioners are not deemed to be municipal employees for purposes of the conflict of interest law. That's good because it means if you have another position, it's not a direct conflict. Like under state law, you can't hold more than one position if even one is paid. But it's important to remember what the conflict of interest law is intended to do. And its job is to ensure that the actions being taken by public officials and employees are taken with the public official, with the town as the goal, as the entity that's being served rather than individual interests. So, you all are representing constituents, but you're sitting here. If there are people or things that affect you or your financial interests, it is a good idea, especially if you're already an employee of the town in some other way or a volunteer for the town, it's good to disclose that. The person who's speaking here and recommending X, Y, or Z is actually my neighbor. I've known them since I was 2. But of course, I'm going to listen to what they have to say with an open mind and, just like I would with anyone else. The nice thing about that is that that's on the table. No one has to feel suspicious or concerned. And don't assume that just because you think everybody else knows that everybody else does. I like to suggest that you think about it as if someone who doesn't know anyone in town at all came to a meeting. 90% of the people in the room might know that, that's your brother or whatever. But that other person doesn't know. And so it's better to just say so. So I encourage you to do that. If you want to file a disclosure, I'll forward that form as well. So if there's anything that you think people should know, I'm a teacher and I work for the town, or I work for, whatever. You go ahead and file a disclosure. It's a good idea because, again, if someone says, oh, this person is acting because they have they're predisposed to do X, Y, or Z, it's nice to have it out there. Oh, no, I filed with the town clerk, day 2, that I do work for the town, but I'm going to participate, in the best interest of the town and without regard to my personal interests. Yes?
So no need to recuse for any reason?
The only reason you would recuse is because if anyone here, and I'm sorry, I don't know everybody, if anyone here, I heard you mention that you are on a volunteer committee, and that you're an employee. So you want to.
I'm an employee as well.
You're an employee as well. I did know that. It's important to make that disclosure, but you're really not acting on anything that's in your personal financial interest at this stage. Now, if at some point along the way you say, let's just hypothetically say, town councilors should be paid $10,000 a meeting, and I want to run for town councilor, that would be the kind of thing where now you're participating in a matter in which you have a financial interest. Now, the question is it a reasonably foreseeable and direct financial interest? Is it not? It's, again, because if you're a charter commissioner only, you're not a municipal employee. So it's not a violation of anything. But it's not going to look good, and it's not going to feel good to people when they're hearing that. So if you are a municipal employee, then you really can't participate in matters that affect your financial interests, because even though as a charter commissioner you might not be subject to the conflict of interest law, you are subject to the conflict of interest law, whether you're a volunteer or a paid employee in those other positions. Okay? So anybody who holds another position with the town as a volunteer, as an employee, in my view, it's better to just file a disclosure now, put it on the record. That way anyone who wants to can come in and look at them and say, oh, this person works here, that person works there, this person's on this committee, this person's on that committee. So I would highly recommend doing that. I think it gives the public greater confidence in the work that you do. And then if something in particular is to come up at some point that you think really doesn't look good, then you can make another one. You also have the ability to make a statement on the record at an open meeting as another way of making a public disclosure. And then there are times when people, even though they don't have a financial interest and wouldn't be prohibited from participating, that they just really aren't comfortable participating. There's nothing that says you have to participate in something if you're not comfortable in it. You may recuse yourself just because you choose, for a particular reason or for no reason. Now, if you recuse yourself, and this whole speech up to now was to get here. If you choose to recuse yourself, that is different than abstaining, okay? Abstaining means not voting, not participating. Recusing means removing yourself from the table and sitting in the audience like a regular member of the public, not asking for or looking for special treatment from the rest of the body, okay? When you sit up there and you just don't talk, or you just say, I'm going to stay out of this one, this isn't my dog, or it's not my fight, that's fine, but you're still participating because you're sitting at the table. So in order to recuse, you need to actually stand up and go and sit down somewhere else.
But they can stay in the room.
The Ethics Commission would recommend that you leave. I tend to advise that that's completely a personal decision, that you have the same rights as any other member of the public, and that as long as you aren't looking for or seeking special, or providing special treatment. So that's on you guys who are still sitting at the table not to treat that person specially. What do I mean? They don't get to speak first. If someone leaves this table and goes to sit out there, they don't get to go first. They don't get to speak when no one else gets to speak. So as we said, the public doesn't have a general right to speak. So if if it's determined that the body is going to allow speaking back and forth for this one charter commissioner member who's sitting over here, but no one else, that's special treatment, okay? Or if they get to go first, or if they get to speak for a super long time. So if you are recusing yourself, when you get up, you need to be very careful to say, as you know, I'm a member of the Charter Commission, but I'm speaking in my own personal capacity, okay? And it's really important because that's the clue that allows other people to understand, oh, you're not participating, you're you're not involved in this, and your opinion, while it's important, it's not going to be counted in the vote. Okay? So again, if you want to abstain, and that's something else, maybe you can't make up your mind, or maybe you feel like this is just something you'd rather sit on the sidelines for, you really don't care, and I don't mean that you don't mind whatever the outcome is, either one is fine, then you could just say abstain. And abstaining means not voting. You count towards the quorum, you need 5 people to be here, but not towards the quantum of vote. And that's the other thing under the open meeting law. You need a quorum of members physically here to meet. If you don't have a quorum, you have to go home. The law doesn't actually say that, but it is a terrible idea to stay here with less than a quorum, okay? Because some of the things you guys hear at that non-meeting may, in fact, be things that you talk about at the next meeting. And so then people are like, wait, but that didn't happen at a meeting. We didn't have any ability to hear that. Right, because they thought there wasn't a meeting because there was less than a quorum. So really, if there's not a quorum, go home. Email is exceptionally dangerous. Okay, I can't over stress that you cannot deliberate amongst a quorum by email. What does that mean, deliberate? It means talk about anything that's within your jurisdiction. Now, you have a broad area of jurisdiction, so you're going to have to be really careful. You can email about dates for meetings. Scheduling is okay. Or you could email something and say, oh, here's the North Attleboro Charter. But what you can't do is share your ideas, feelings, beliefs, concerns. I think, this is exciting. In my opinion, in my view, anytime that it's like the toddler rule. Toddlers, they're like, anytime that you feel like that's what's going to happen, you can't send it.
Okay, what about something along the lines of, article comes out that happens to be relevant?
You can send it.
I can send it, can I say, for discussion in our next meeting?
Yes, and that is a wise thing to say, but you can't say, this captures my feelings exactly, or right on point, I agree.
Got it.
Okay? Feelings, ideas, beliefs, concerns. The second you feel yourself emoting, you got to cut it off.
Okay.
Now, what about emailing amongst less than a quorum? It seems like it'd be okay because it's not an obvious violation of the open meeting law. But here's the risk. Let's say the 3 of us are on a committee and I email Lucia, and Lucia's like, oh, I want to make sure. And she presses forward, and now that's 3 of the 5 of us who've read that email. That's a quorum, it's a violation. The other thing is, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. So let's say I tell Lucia something and then Lucia talks to Jane and Jane, and now it wasn't a violation originally, just the 2 of us, but it turns into one. And you have to be super careful about that. It can be a serial conversation or a serial email. That creates that violation.
But does it have to be intentional?
It does not have to be intentional. It doesn't matter, and the AG doesn't care, to put it bluntly. The AG is very conservative in the way they interpret the law. They're an enforcement authority. So you want to be wise about using email. My suggestion is have your conversations at the table, as tempting as it is to say, oh, this is really important, or I really like that idea, or what a great this is sad, because one of the groups that I worked with, someone wrote at the end of the night, what a great meeting. We all had so much to say, and it was such a difficult thing, and I'm so impressed, and I'm grateful to have worked with you, and blah, blah, blah. Open meeting law violation. No joke.
Wow.
Okay? So no feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns. And be careful about sending stuff. The main purpose is this is the place to do the work. That's what the open meeting law is about. It's saying do the work at the table. So by doing the work at the table, you reduce any risk of a procedural violation, and you kind of keep people focused on what it is you're doing instead of on whether you're following the rules. The public records law is also really important. Any records that you create related to your official business that you make or receive could be public records subject to mandatory disclosure upon request. There is an exemption for your own personal notes. So if you take notes, don't share them with other people, okay? Because the second that I pick up my notes and I say, Lucia, look at that, now I made my notes a public record.
This is only things that we have created. Let's say, for example, we're reviewing somebody else's charter.
Well, any document made or received turns into a public record.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean, if you just look at a charter online, it doesn't mean you have to print the charter and bring it in.
Yep.
But if you want other people to read it and you send it to them, now the fact that you sent that email is a public record, and the content of the email is a public record.
And do we have to post that?
You don't have to post it. I don't know what the circumstances are in terms of emails. Either you get a town email address and you only use your town email address for purposes of conversing by email, again, limited to scheduling and forwarding of information from other people, and not your feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns. Or you have like a single email address that you copy all of your emails to. And that way, they're on the town servers, and you don't have to worry about a public records request coming in, and then you having to go look through all of your personal emails to find the emails that are subject to the public records law. Okay? The Secretary of State, through the Supervisor of Public Records, has ordered private computers to be forensically examined because people claim they didn't have emails when they did, and they didn't provide them in response to a public records request. And so the supervisor said, that's fine, then we're just going to send in basically someone to take your computer apart because we believe that they're there. So to the extent that you could just use your town email address for this purpose, or a single email address where you're copying it, that way all this stuff goes onto the town servers, you don't need to worry about it. Let's say you won't do that because you don't believe in, I don't know, town servers. You need to print anything that's related to your charter commission business and bring it in with you when you come into your meeting, and it goes into a file, I guess, with Lucia for now. So it's much easier to just have that one email address or a town email address. Now, some people, if the town doesn't give you an email address, will create their own Gmail account, like charter commissioner blah at gmail.com, and all of their business related to the charter they do from that, and that way it's very easy to identify what's charter commission business and what's not. The other thing is, because the emails themselves are public records, regardless of how nice a person you are, do not inquire about a person's sister, mother, brother, father, niece, how they feel, how they are since their accident, how their back is doing, because that stuff is private and it's personal. And even though you might not have a privacy right in your charter commission emails, maybe they do. And so if we get a public records request, now we have to look through them all to see if there's anything private in there. Just don't use email for chit chat is what it comes down to. Okay, it's for a particular purpose and it's an official purpose, and limit your normal tendencies to go back and forth with someone. Hey, how are you? What's going on? Did you like that movie? All that stuff. No, just because it's going to be in those emails. I like to say that if you're going to send an email, be comfortable reading it on the front page of the newspaper or on a blog. Otherwise, don't send it.
Is it safe to assume messaging apps are under the same?
It is safe to assume that. And there's actually records retention requirements as well. The way to save text are really not as advanced. My advice, don't use them for anything but scheduling, just like you would use email for scheduling. Can you make a 5 o'clock meeting? No, I'm going to be late. Not, how do you feel about blah, blah, blah? And if you follow the general rule that your discussions about substantive matters are supposed to happen here, then the risk of creating a text or an email that would require disclosure is much smaller. That would be concerning, is much smaller, because it would all happen here and it won't be on those texts, okay, or those emails. All right. And I am a big fan of the considering the reply to all a flashing red button, like nuclear holocaust, press here, because that creates the biggest risk for a violation. If you can't make a Tuesday meeting, it's just much better to email back to, if the chair's doing the scheduling, just email back the chair and just say, I really can't meet Tuesday. Because the risk is someone's going to say, it's imperative we meet to discuss blah, 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 violation of the open meeting law. Okay? Now, I know that all sounds really horrible, and I do apologize, but it's important to recognize that this happens in a very particular context. And that context is the public elected you to talk about this very important thing, and the open meeting conflict of interest and public records laws essentially say the public needs to have access to your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and beliefs about that topic. And so it says the meeting should be open and the records are subject to mandatory disclosure except in very limited circumstances. And also that the town is supposed to be kind of the one thing that you're working for and not individual purposes. So I call those things the 3 legs of the municipal stool, and they really do They really do. If you think about why they're there, even though they're sometimes a pain, they really do help you to understand why not to do an email that says feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns, and why not to speak to 3 different people about something. The second that you've done that, you've made it created an opportunity for there to be a violation. I will tell you that my former partner, one of the founding members of the firm, I used to do these trainings with her right after I got to KP from the secretary's office, and she is very well established, and she'd come out and she'd give her speech, and she would say, and you may not speak to each other outside of this room. And I'd be there thinking, that's not true. That's not what the law says. Like, why would she say that? And every time when we leave, at the beginning, I'd say, why do you keep saying that? She's like, because if you tell them they can talk, then they will. And there is some truth to that. So you really want to try and establish the better habits you get in earlier, the better you do. If you talk about a document at a meeting, it needs to be listed at the end of the minutes. That's another thing that's really important. And if, and none of that has to be provided ahead of time. You don't have to. But some communities, some commissions like to say, we're going to be looking at the Billerica and the Watertown and Franklin charters at tonight's meeting. They're posted here. Okay, so you can use your website to provide information. You could also think about using your website to get information. So, if you have any ideas about town government, email us at this email address, so you can do that. A lot of committees have considered, or commissions have considered using a survey, and that's something else. I know they did that in North Attleboro, so that's something else that you can use to get information. The thing to remember is when someone sends you something as well, it's a public record. Okay, so if people want to ensure that the fact that they've commented is not going to be public, then they want to talk to you instead of emailing you. I think, I'm sure I have a lot more to say, as you can tell, but I think that's probably good to get you started. What I will plan to send is all of the kind of standard documents from the state and that I've collected about charters. So I'll send that to you. I'll send you a couple of different types of charters for each type of government. And I'll send you my PowerPoints that I have for open meeting, public records, and conflict of interest laws. They're summaries. They're a lot more accessible than kind of all of the hundreds of pages you'd have to read if you were going to read the other things. And I'll also send you the website so that you know where to go if you want more information.
Thank you. Could you also send some possible dates of town meetings or?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I have quite a list. I'll send it right out.
Okay.
Yep. The next month and a half is really the time to go to meetings. There's 20 coming up on Monday that I know of. So there's a lot of opportunity over the next few weeks. Is there anything? Yes.
Sorry, and this may be applicable more to Lucia. We have a space now on the town website. Do we personally have access to that to upload things to?
No, I'll deal with that. I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Okay. There's guidelines with who has access
Got it.
to
Okay.
the website.
So that would come from the chair to you to
Comes
say, or
from me.
whoever was
Whatever-
authorized?
Whatever you want.
And you post it?
Post it up there, then email it to me, and I'll get it up there.
Great. Thank you.
If there's a particular way you want to call me, I'll take care of it for you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions?
How often, and what is our access to you to be able to ask questions throughout the process? Like, how often should we engage you to come to the meetings or give advice or whatever?
You should talk to the town manager.
Okay.
And get a feel for that. I'm happy to help, and I've seen a lot. I can help you to make sense out of some of the choices and understand the implications. And that's really where I think you want to, once you are thinking about things that you're interested in learning about, well, can we do this? Don't go on for 6 weeks talking about that you can't create a super planning board and then say, oh, wait, we could have asked that 6 weeks ago and had a super planning board. So, but that really, access to council goes through the through the town manager, you have the right, to ask for, not the right, I mean, you may ask for counsel, and it doesn't have to be me, but I think I'm a good choice.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking, I don't get too far down a rabbit hole and find out we can't do something that we were thinking we were all discussing that we wanted to do or whatever.
Typically, one of the things that's really important about managing any kind of budget, and you probably have experience with this, is having all the questions go through the chair rather than them come from various people. You might ask a question that's different from the way you ask the question. I could give an answer to both that are completely right, but when you talk to each other, you basically think you asked the same question and you got a different answer. So it's really important that those questions come from one person. And the other thing to do is as you go along, you can collect your questions, okay? We have these 17 questions. We don't want to move to the next thing until we get some answers to those, so let's ask council to respond for our next meeting. So that's another way of dealing with that, rather than calling every time something comes up.
Okay, great.
You mentioned budget. If I'm not mistaken, the town funds us with an initial budget.
The way the law is written, it says shall. I mean, again, there needs to be money to give money. So that's something I would talk to the town manager about.
Okay.
Yep.
That's one of the things I was trying to determine is do we have access to you as the town's attorney, or do we have to retain you personally as the charter commission?
I've worked with charter commissions in towns where we're council, and it's just through the current agreement.
Okay.
As town council assisting the charter commission. As you work through this, the law is the law. What's right for you guys is right for you guys. Certainly, I've been doing work here in this town for a long time, and so I have my own opinions about the charter. But that's not my job. My job isn't about what I think, and it's about, what information do you need and how to answer it.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Thank you for taking us through all that. That was.
Yeah, thank you.
Still trying to absorb it.
Absolutely. I know it's a lot to take in, but I think it's good to have an overview. And then, once you have all the information, you can start with your reading. It's great. Really interesting. I'm a policy person, so I find it fascinating.
Getting back again to open meeting and records retention, sharing things, let's say using Google Docs or Dropbox. Any issues with that? And there's no real method for commenting on it. It's just a storage or an archive facility.
I would talk to the town manager again about how he would recommend that you guys share information. Okay. If the town doesn't do that generally, because again, you need to keep a record of what's shared.
Yep.
So you'd have to, and I don't know a ton, I mean, I've used Dropbox, but I don't know about what records it creates in terms of when it was shared and how. So you'd have to think about that, because that would be a requirement of the law. It may just be easier to do the email.
Okay.
Again, with the blinking red,
Yeah.
do not reply to all.
I'm just thinking about in terms of the size of some of these documents, they're going to be quite large and,
Yeah,
we
maybe
run
you
the
could
risk-
post them on the town's website. I mean, you might be able to post them on your own website, because if you're just reading charters of other towns, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with other people knowing that that's what you're looking at.
Okay.
So that might be a way to deal with that as well.
Just got a question. I don't know if, Lucia, you'd have the answer to this. Would it be something that the town would be able to issue us email addresses per the charter commission? Or do you think it's probably easier, like you said, just to create charter commission so-and-so at Gmail and have our own?
Well, I do believe you're all going to have your own email addresses. I would think every other board and committee does have their own email addresses.
Okay, great.
So,
So there's one
I'll
for the
run that
general
by-
board and then one for each of the individuals?
no, just the individuals.
Okay.
Just the individuals. And actually, what I can do is I've got all your email addresses, and I think I've sent emails to all of you about, the date for tonight and that. You take that, you've got everybody's email addresses also. But I think have I set your names up individually on the Charter Commission, on the committee? I think I did. Did I put the names up there? I've got a look.
I haven't looked lately,
Okay,
so.
I'll have to look at that, and I can tie in email addresses on those if you want your email addresses out there. That's not a problem, if you want people to be able to have the access to get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
I'm sorry?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I just think for like public access, if we have a set email that's only for this,
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
get tied up into,
I agree.
you know.
No,
if
that's
did
fine, that's
Somebody
fine.
requests something,
Yep.
and now they're saying, I gotta go through my own.
Yeah, they're your personals,
Yes.
yeah, no, we don't
Yes.
want that.
And
Let me-
And it takes a long
yeah,
time, and that you only
exactly.
have
Thousands of
10
emails
days.
a day. I mean,
Right.
with this, you're only gonna get emails pertaining to this.
Pertaining to this, yeah, we'll go on the website. I'll talk to Mike, and I don't think that'll be an issue, and that IT will have to set up. And
And
we'll
then-
get that set up.
And then perhaps you can have a group email address for comments that people might want to provide. Just don't respond to all. You know, the one thing to say when you get comments like that, if it's comments, you know, this is important, that you can just write back and say, thank you for your feedback. We will consider it at a properly posted meeting. Sometimes that, in a group email address, they will have a bounce back that says that. Thank you for your feedback, or thank you for your input,
Yeah.
rather than having any one person be charged with responding to those.
You can also have, if you wish, you can also have, for example, Charter Commission, contact the Charter Commission, and the Charter Commission, if they click on that link, it will go to you only as chair.
Okay.
And you get that says, Lucia Longhurst has sent a message to you, a private message to you, and you just read it. And if you
share
want that,
as-
that can be done also.
So is it something that we can set up as the commission about how we're gonna approach people talking from a public setting? Like, and for instance, I just think with this type of committee, some of the input is, I mean, majority of the input is gonna be so important from the citizens of town to try to basically get feedback on what they see as some of the issues, but also where they want some of this to go or some of this to change. Like, I understand what you were saying about giving them the ability to speak and not sitting here having a back and forth engagement with somebody who's either, you know, animated or you know, mad at something, but I think we gotta be careful on how we just say, well, you can only talk at this time, or, well, we'll consider it and then we'll talk, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's important that we give them
Yep.
the ability to come in, because we're talking about something that affects the entire town.
Right.
We're talking about something that affects the day-in-day operations of town government. I
Yep.
think it's important to be able to say to people, we encourage you to come here, we encourage you to talk. I mean, obviously, there's gotta be parameters on it, but I think it's gonna be an important thing.
Yeah.
I also think people are going to recognize, you know, we're human, we're voluntary, we are, you know, their neighbors. You know, we're not a perfect entity and we don't have all of the answers. And I think saying, I don't know, is a perfectly reasonable answer to some questions. And, you know, certainly, you know, we will take it under advisement. We can get back to you. Please come visit the next meeting. We'll put you on the agenda if there's something that we can't address now.
Yeah, absolutely. The way the commission chooses to operate is its choice. But in fact, the chair under state law has the ability of being able to decide who gets to talk. That's one of the things that is one of the powers or authorities that are given to the chair. But the commission could decide, you know, I had mentioned earlier, it could say, you know, we have things we need to accomplish, we have people coming in, so we're going to reserve an hour and a half for us, but let's give the public 15 minutes on a regular basis. First come, first serve, no more than 3 minutes each. You know, talk about whatever you want. And yeah, it doesn't mean you can't respond, but certainly, I think you'll see over time, there is some value in saying this is the public's part of the meeting and this is our part of the meeting. And, you know, you might say, look, this is something we're talking about for the first time. This isn't our regular public part of the meeting, but we'd like some feedback. Anyone who's here wants to, provide their comments, we'd love to have it. You don't have to have a rule that no one can ever speak, but it is important that this body gets to do some of the talking amongst itself, and it's different when members of the public are kind of jumping into that conversation all the time. And I completely agree with you. This is a public process. It's a public process for a reason. But that's one of those areas where some level of formality is useful. And you can decide how long. Maybe you guys want to give a half an hour to the public to speak. Or maybe you find that after the first few meetings, the public really only wants to listen and they only want to come, the people that want to talk are just there for the first 10 minutes. So you can figure that out as you go.
I have a question, if I may. Yes, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lucy, you got it.
No, I just, just what is, as a town clerk, what is the term, their term? Is there a specific term at this point? They've been elected, is it a year term, a 2-year term?
They're elected until 30 they are elected and hold office until 30 days after their charter is voted on.
Oh, okay.
And if it, I think, hold on, there's another opportunity here. I just was looking at that. Just one sec.
Yeah, we would terminate May 26th, 2021. Which is 30 days from the election of April
Yeah.
27th, 2021. Which seems like a really long time.
It's gonna fly by.
You'll get used to it.
Yeah, what the law says is, a charter commission shall continue to exist until 30 days after the election in which its charter adoption or revisions proposal, if any, is required to be submitted to the voter, or until 30 days after submission to the town meeting of a final report recommending no new charter revision.
So, I mean, aside from letting the public come up and talk for a few minutes if we choose to do that, we can also just invite department heads in to, as part of our agenda, to understand like what's working and what doesn't work today.
Yes.
Right? That's part of our information gathering.
Absolutely, and that is typically a really useful part of the meetings that you're going to have. And you can ask questions, and they can go back and forth, as much as it seems appropriate. Same thing with you have in, typically, the Board of Assessors will be invited in on one night. The Conservation Commission will be invited in. The Planning Board will be invited. The Zoning Board. Now, not everyone might come. So you might have 2 members that are willing to come. And then the town manager, any department heads, to ask about how things work. Of course, department heads can sometimes feel uncomfortable talking about things that don't work, and so it may be better to ask them what does work. Because they continue to work for the people that they're talking about. So
Yeah.
that's just something to bear in mind. But you can also, if you hear that North Attleboro has a wonderful DPW, you can have in the DPW superintendent for North Attleboro talk about why. Why is their program so good? What works really well about it? How is it organized? Those are the kinds of things that that's different than a public speak time. Because public speak time is people come up and they say whatever they want, versus being invited to have discourse with the commission about their position or their service and what they provide.
Yeah, okay.
Would you recommend doing a particular board or department, one per meeting? Multiples in a single meeting?
I think it's useful to look at the different jobs that they do and decide, should we be talking to executive branch first? Should we be talking to the moderator first? Should we be talking to, are we more interested in the land use, component? And every town is different about what's, the right place to start. But I think with the manager, the board of selectmen, in most towns, the planning board, and sometimes the board of assessors, maybe the school committee, they need their own time.
Yep.
And, you can plan it. Okay, we'll spend an hour with them. Because, at some point, you've asked the questions that you found useful at that time, and maybe you say, we'd love to invite you back in a few months once we've had an opportunity to hear more from other. Typically, it's the executive, the moderator, and then the decision-making bodies, the quasi-judicials, so CONSCOM and Planning Board and Zoning Board. You might want to talk to the police and fire chiefs, any other key department heads, town clerk. I think it's important to understand what people are actually doing, like what their days look like and what their responsibilities are. It's very different to think about, should we have an elected or appointed, whatever, and then when you talk to people, you find, well, it's really important we have continuity in this position, and here's why. Okay, well, that's a different question than whether we just like elected or appointed. So finding out what they actually do, and what they need in terms of support to make their jobs and positions work well, is really part of the process.
Any other questions, comments? So do we want to try and decide on a venue and day and then schedule the next meeting?
We need a second date in case we continue the June 3rd meeting.
In case that one runs over.
Right. Do we want to have a second date so we can post that?
Okay. That has to be within, it has to happen within 48 hours if we continue it?
No, if you plan it ahead,
Yeah.
and you're right, and A+, if you continue it at that meeting and it's not already posted, you need at least 48 hours from the time it's posted.
Yep.
But you can plan it ahead and post it ahead, and then if you don't need it, you just post canceled,
Okay.
okay? You can't go the other way. What you can't do is plan to meet on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, when you really don't plan to meet on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then just pop in on one of those nights.
I apologize, but I have to go. Sorry.
Should
Too
we,
much to just do it for the next night?
looking,
I
yeah.
like the consistency, just going right to the next night. If we need
Yeah.
it, we need it,
I agree.
instead of wait until Wednesday.
Yep.
So do you want to choose a different venue, though, for that second night? Like, maybe do you want to say the library because it's more likely to be available and, it's- yeah, so you can check.
Check availability,
Yeah.
yeah.
So maybe plan it there, subject to availability.
What day?
What day is the 4th?
So we're looking at
Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
June 4th at what time? Should we
What-
make it a
what-
little
I would say
later?
start
What-
later.
What day is the,
It's a Tuesday?
it's a Tuesday on June 4th?
Yes.
Sorry.
Should we,
I'll just throw out that, I know it'll affect me, it might affect other people in the room. That's class night at the high school dinner, so anybody with a high school student is going to have a conflict.
Good call.
you're good? What about Denise? How old are Denise's kids?
No.
Okay.
Middle school, right?
Just me. Yeah, that's true, it's only senior.
Planning board
Yes.
No, the,
and Board of Selectmen room.
planning board's here on the 4th.
But I think they were talking about the library.
Oh, you're talking the library?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
Have to
okay.
call. I don't have no idea on their schedule. I'll call them tomorrow if you want me to.
That'd be great. And if everybody is agreeable, I think that might be an ideal meeting spot. As long as we have access to it, the library. It's not gonna, we're not gonna have to worry about being in conflict of a meeting, that may pop up here, especially FinCom.
Consistently?
Yes,
That's where we meet?
yeah,
Okay.
going forward,
Yeah,
kind of being that
That's fine.
standing meeting place.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Everybody agree?
Yeah, that allows us to be more flexible.
Keith has given us highway department access
Yeah.
if we need it. If the room happens to be not available. Of course.
And I have a question about our meetings. If we, if we schedule, let's say, we meet twice a month, or 3 times a month, and then, we get to a point where we decide, okay, we need to meet more, or we need to meet less, we don't need that time, we do need that time. What's the process for us to say, okay, we're going from, meeting twice a month to now we need to meet 3 times a month?
It's really, it's really just a discussion. Whatever works for you is fine. You can schedule as many meetings or as few meetings as you want. I do think that, looking at the amount of time you have, right now, if you're in this education and diagnosis phase, this is going to be when you're trying to meet with people. So having that scheduled out is useful, and you can look at and say, okay, we're going to meet every other week or every week or 3 times or whatever it is for this long, but let's have all of these boards and committees in on these nights. You can send out a request. Does that work? Because there is a fair amount of schedules that need to be done. And then when you get to the end of that, then it's, how often do you need to meet to come up with whatever recommendations you're going to be coming up with? And that, you may want a little more of an intense period to try and get into it and then get it done. And you also have to think about at the end, if you're recommending anything in particular, about selling it and what that looks like. You have to do a preliminary report after 16 months. So that's an opportunity to kind of check in, where are you, what happens next? But by then, you may feel pretty sure about where you are, even if you don't have all the words written. So, I think taking the next 16 months and looking at all the things that need to be accomplished, and again, Mark is probably, I'm sorry, Mark, but you may want to ask him, he prepared a spreadsheet that had all of the tasks that needed to be done laid out. Yeah, it really was very, very helpful. And that way you can sit down and say, all right, if I'm trying to plan for how I'm going to spend my time over the next year, I can take a look and see, okay, at this point is when I'm really going to have to devote my time.
Considering this is just logistics, any issue sharing amongst the group using, there's a software that I have a subscription to, and I can invite people. It works similar to Dropbox. Again, there's really no place, there's a spot for notes and comments, but it pertains more to what law it's pertaining to or the deadlines to complete them. Any issue that you would see with open meeting law with sharing something like that?
Well, I think it's fine as long as you're not talking substance
Yep.
of things. So for example, if it was tasks that have been assigned at a meeting, then there's no problem with it being on a spreadsheet. But if you haven't assigned the tasks and you have it there, important to blah, 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 well, now you've run into a violation. It's probably, and it's very tempting to use the tools that are out there in the real world.
You have, it's a major project. You
Yeah.
need a project management
So
software.
it's possible that what you could do is you create that schedule, you make sure that there's no feelings, ideas, beliefs, and concerns, and then just email it to people.
Okay.
And you talk about it at every meeting. Okay, so we're gonna add these 5 things to the list of things that need to get done. Who's gonna take responsibility? So you're not gonna do that by email. You're not gonna decide, okay, you're interested in schools, and you're interested in the Board of Assessors, you're interested in the clerk. You have to do that at a meeting.
Right.
So you're gonna assign tasks at meetings, and so it's showing up after the fact in a chart, no big deal.
Okay. I'm thinking, if we can get access to that, I can bring a laptop and we can update it in real time.
Yep.
And we could leave it so that there is actually no capability of anybody else to comment on it. It's,
It's like
maintained-
static. Yep.
Yes, it's maintained by one person. And everybody else has access to view it, but not change it, amend it, or make any comment on it.
Yep. To me, that sounds reasonable, less chance of violating the law, and you have to remember, if you're creating a document, it's a public record subject to mandatory disclosure upon request. So if you created this document today, let's say, and people are viewing it, and then someone wants a copy of it, they're entitled to it.
Yep.
So that's why it's useful, but you need to kind of separate out in your head a little. And this is, there's some sewer commissioners in one of the towns that I represent. Every year I do a training for them, and they are both engineers. And they say to me, you are trying to tell me that I'm supposed to come into this meeting less prepared than I would be to even talk to someone that I work with during the day. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm telling you. I promise I didn't write the law. I am not a state rep or state legislator. You talk to them a state senator, if you want help with that. But it is the concept that here is where the work is going to happen. The other thing, and I didn't mention this earlier, is maybe you guys decide, okay, you 5 are going to deal with, you're going to, have the Foxborough town manager come at whatever time to talk to you because you guys are available. So that's a subcommittee of the committee, and maybe it's 4, maybe 4 of you are going to do. It's a subcommittee, and it needs to be posted, and the same rules apply. So if you had a town, a representative town meeting subcommittee, and a town council subcommittee, and a town manager subcommittee, those subcommittees are subject to the open meeting law. You post, you have an agenda, you keep minutes, and then you come back and you report to the full body. Okay, we met with the Foxborough town manager, here's what we thought were important, here's our minutes, et cetera.
Okay, if I understand that, then if we were to say a group of 3 of us were to attend Dedham's town meeting, as long as we don't talk about it and we hold any discussion until the next meeting with everybody, we are fine, and that doesn't constitute a meeting that we would need to post.
So the idea of a subcommittee is a body that's authorized to act collectively. So if all you said is, we want to deploy charter commissioners to town meetings throughout the state. And you happen to go to the same one as another person, that's okay. You're not acting collectively. There's only 2 of you or 3 of you out of 9, it's not a quorum. But the thing that comes up, and again, you're gonna have to, this is gonna be a struggle, I think, because you have to remember, the more you talk to that person that you attend that meeting with about substantive matters, the more of a chance there is that they say, oh, I just talked to so-and-so, and they said blah, and then the next person says, oh, well, you know, so-and-so went to that meeting, and they loved it, and they told us, and that's how violations happen. So, a committee of 1 is never a committee, it's not a thing. It's a single individual, no open meeting law problems. So 1 person can go anywhere, or 2 people can go anywhere, especially if you go separate. Don't drive in the same car, don't sit together, don't whisper. You think I'm joking, I really am not. No whispering at meetings.
Carpooling.
Yeah, you want to be thoughtful about the way things look, because that's the way open meeting law violations, complaints get filed, is because people think that that's what's happening. I tell a story, and I'm going to tell it because I know people are tired and they want to leave, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I went to a party in a small town where I have a longtime friend, and I was walking by, and I look in the kitchen, and there are all of these people huddled in one spot. And I was thinking, wow, what are they doing? That looks like they're having fun. And someone walks by me and says, that's the Conservation Commission. And immediately in my head, I was like, the Conservation Commission in the kitchen with a knife, right? Because it's like, from Clue. But that's the way things look bad. And so you don't want to create that opportunity for people to suspect a violation. It's better to comply with the letter of the law and not have the procedures burden the commission. And it's hard to deal with when complaints are filed, whether it's public records request, which is just a request, complaints. It takes away from the work that you're doing, and people's kind of trust in the process. So, as I said, it's hard to comply with the open meeting law. It really is. But you should try, because that's your obligation, but also because it's the best thing for the work that you're doing. If you want to deploy people in teams to meetings, that's fine, but just be thoughtful about bringing that information back here. That's really what you're supposed to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Do we want to try and decide what nights we want to meet on, decide when our next meeting is?
Yes.
Good answer.
Thursdays.
I suppose we should find out if the library has any standing engagements.
Madam Chair, I'd suggest you try one night, try one meeting, to plan one meeting, and in the meantime, somebody can investigate.
Got it.
And decide what nights are available. And maybe it turns out the library isn't the best place because of their availability and yours, but at least you could, look into it from there.
And we can do scheduling outside of this,
You can do scheduling outside of this.
But we should probably try to leave here today with.
with at least one date, yes, yeah.
I think it's gonna be harder to nail down a date for a day of the week for everybody than it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm
actually
thinking.
meet.
Like, let's pick one date, and then we can sort of go from there.
Okay. All right. I will entertain a motion.
As everybody flips through phones.
Any date. Let's,
I think if we're going through Monday through Friday, I think everyone can agree Friday's probably out.
yeah.
I mean, for a
agreed.
lot of people, so.
Nobody- yeah.
We basically
I
got,
don't
Monday-
want to torture
We're with
you.
you.
we've got Monday through Thursday.
Do you want to call me tomorrow and I'll get you Laura, the librarian?
Yes, please and thank you.
I'll get you her number, you can talk to her
Awesome.
directly, how's that?
That'd be great, thank you, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
So we have Monday through Thursday. I think it's all kind of agreed Thursday's gonna be a tough day for town. I mean, we don't want to start scheduling stuff in the same time as selectmen's meetings, just for people that want to attend.
Yeah.
And you guys obviously have the other engagements, so I think we're really down to 3 days.
Do we want to try for next week or the week after?
If I may, I reported last town charter when Lieutenant was here, and what he did is he scheduled he did it twice a month. It was close to a year long, and he did alternating Tuesdays and Thursdays to miss the selectmen and the plan.
Oh, yeah.
And that worked.
So
Really well.
Tuesday for one
Right.
meeting, Thursday for the
Yeah,
next.
because they do every other, both
Right,
do
'cause it's
every
every
other.
other.
And that worked really well. That's what happened the last time I captured. Just a thought.
Tuesdays would be conflicting with planning board?
So,
Every other.
Every
Are we trying
other.
to pick a day or
Just,
the
just one,
next
let's,
meeting?
yeah, just one
Pick
day.
a date, and then we'll focus on the location.
Yeah.
And see if we can get something a little more consistent.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
How about Monday, the 20th?
What's that?
Except if you're going to Dedham Town Meeting. I'm joking.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I've heard it, it's been highly recommended, so maybe we should try and avoid that. Tuesday, the 21st.
That works
Well, let me
for
take a poll. Do we want to try and meet as soon as next week, or do we want another week to kind of, I want to go back and watch this meeting again?
I think we got.
There was a lot of information.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to meet a couple times prior to our
Yeah.
I agree.
commission sessions.
But let's
We
just
wanna
set.
get at least, you
let-
know,
yeah,
so that's why
let's-
the sooner the better.
Okay, so why don't we try then for next week? If everybody's okay with that? Board of Selectmen are meeting that week on the 16th.
15th is free.
What's that?
The 15th is free here,
Okay.
if you want the 15th.
I can't make it on the 15th.
May 15th is the town,
meeting.
annual town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a little busy.
I mean, I think if we look at, I mean, I know it's short to that, the 3rd there, but if we push it to the week of the 20th, at least gives us the week of the 20th and the week of the 27th to meet,
Yeah.
two of them before the 3rd. And that gives us next week to kind of review
Yeah.
the boatload of
Digest.
information that you're going to send over to
Yeah.
us. Because I think,
Wonder what we got ourselves
I
in.
mean, it's great coming back next week, but without being able to digest what she has, I think we're going to be in the same boat we're in right now as, where do we go from here, you know what I mean?
Yep,
Well, if you want to book the 21st and 28th here, you're free, it's free.
okay.
If you want to come here the 21st and the 28th, I can put you in for the Board of Selectmen room right here.
That would be
How's
great.
sound?
The
Yes.
28th is Memorial Day, just as a point of information.
27.
Oh, sorry, the
21st.
27th, rather,
27th
sorry.
Memorial
Yep.
Day.
Yep.
So if we do the 2 Tuesdays, the 21st and 28th,
28th.
that gives us a kind of a set thing. And we can also have this room, which makes it easy for
For this room,
taping.
what time?
6:30
Same
work for
time.
everybody?
6:30?
I won't be here the week of the 20th, but
Okay.
I'll be here the 28th.
I will not be able to attend the 21st.
Is it that whole week, or is it just that, is there a better day that week?
Is it what?
Is there a better day that week?
The only day that week that works for me is Monday.
I'm good with Monday, too.
do Monday.
I can move to Monday, the
I'm
20th.
fine Monday. Is the room available, Lucia?
What day?
Monday, the 20th?
20th?
20th? Yep, you good?
Okay.
So you want what time, 6:30?
Does 6:30 work for everyone?
Sure.
I won't be here, but I'm taking the whole week off.
Got it. Okay. So let's schedule our next meeting for Monday, the 20th at 6:30 PM in Norton Town Hall Board of Selectmen room.
And do you still want the 28th in here?
I think so, yes.
Okay,
Please
I'll
and thank
put
you.
in.
Thank you. Second meeting, Tuesday, the 28th, same time, 6:30. Let's just make 6:30 our standing time. That works for everybody?
Yep.
And same room. Is there anything else we need to do? We set the date for the hearing, we set the date for the commission. We talked Lauren's ear off.
Or I talk to yours off.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? Adjourned.
Thank you.
You did the gavel.